Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 142. Let's build a world. I'm just kidding. Let's do some outlining. No, like for real, like this time, Jeff, let's actually do an outline.
You sure?
Yeah, this time. I mean, I know I didn't mean it last time, but hey, episode 142. Let's do an outline.
Yeah, let's try.
Let's try.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Welcome back. As always, I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram, here to talk about outlines.
And I am Michael Miller, here to derail our discussion about outlines.
He's actually, I found out after we attempted to do the last episode, he is the founding member of the I Will Destroy Any Attempt to Outline Club.
Yes, I'm on the anti-outlining board of directors, actually. I'm a treasurer.
Founding member?
Yeah, well, yeah, founding member. I'm treasurer, so yeah. No, this time we're not actually going to do an outline. We're going to talk about outlines. Jeff has outlined the episode.
What a loser.
Right, yeah. But obviously since our last attempt, which was only one episode ago, didn't go according to plan, we figured we'd give you something more useful to work with.
And if you're unsure of why it's important to outline a story before you start, we really suggest you go
listening to the prior episode.
Because Michael really believed he was at that point.
I thought I was.
And for valid reasons, but the problem is sometimes when you start doing it, you realize that you're not where you're at. And if you're ending a rhymo at that point, it might be too late to recover and actually write words. So I think it's actually a great episode just learning that one lesson.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly learned it. I'm doing a good job of world building. I'm doing a bad job of story writing and arc preparation.
So what we want to talk about here is, first, I thought it would maybe be useful to have a list of a few items I like to make sure I have in place before I write a story outline. Because for me, I don't care about all of the paperwork, but I really do like having a story outline, which is what I call it, which is modified from a normal story outline. But there are some things that you need to know before you start the process. And the other thing you need to understand is, for me, all of these things are iterative. So I'm
sorry, iterative?
Yes.
And what do you mean by that?
So I iterate through it. So it's like I'll do a pass through. I kind of look through it, see if it makes sense to me. And I might go in, I might rebalance, I might add more things or take certain things away before I'm done. It's not a one pass through kind of activity for me.
So like all of our creative processes here on this show, you're not going to get it perfect on the first try.
And you're not expected to.
Yeah, you're going to go through it again. You're going to modify. You're going to edit. You're going to amend and adjust. You're going to get new ideas too.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're going to think whether or not it's worth it. The idea you want to have is it also helps you prep the story in your mind, because it's a lot easier to write a story if you can start at the beginning and then go through the end than when you are writing scene here, scene there, and then trying to make everything pull together. I personally think that's more difficult. For some of you, it might work better for you that way. But for me personally, I usually, when I start writing, I kind of know the story in my head and I'm adding in the details on the page so someone else can see what's kind of going on in my noodle.
You're a terrifying noodle. Terrifying noodle.
All right. So the first thing, and this is from our episode on prepping for NaNoWriMo before that, it's the idea is you need to have a mission statement for your story, which is it's kind of like the central idea and theme of your story. And it could be modified. Like Michael was talking about for his, he wanted to talk about some crap. I forget what it was.
Be a good person.
Be a good person was sort of the idea he was trying to convey in his story. And that's good to have too. But for me, it's a little bit more than that. It's the idea of that's part of it. But the other part of it is what's kind of the general theme of the story, which, as people would know, is part of a story writing, is knowing the theme. And the next thing to do is you need an idea of the world. You might not have a full world, but my idea is you need to have at least a mechanic that you want to play with, and that's the reason why you're choosing this world to do it from. Or you might be on the other extreme where you're like me and you have a framework world that you're working with, or maybe a world that has everything completely done. which I don't think is possible, but you might think it's done.
Well, my recommendation to anybody that wants to do NaNoWriMo that isn't already well onto their world building, NaNoWriMo is about writing a novel. It's not about building a world.
No.
So if you don't think that you have it in you to flesh yourself out a world, I don't recommend that you try it in the brief amount of time that we have left. I recommend doing one of two things: either just use the real world and write yourself a good story, or two, just change one thing. Like we've talked about this before, where, a world building exercise could be simply one thing is different in the world, but it's a world changing one thing.
Yes.
So
you might not want a whole free world, or you might try and gunsling it if that's in your skill set.
Yeah, I mean,
But the idea is typically for world building, as long as you have at least a mechanic that you want to change, and it's the reason why the world's being created, then that will be enough to start. And then you need an idea of the story. And so for that, I have a few different things I like to kind of know. The scope of the story, is it going to be something small and intimate, or is it something big? I kind of like to call it the Beckett to epic scale.
The what?
Beckett to epic scale.
Beckett to epic.
Yeah.
And what's the Beckett
Samuel
reference?
Beckett, it was an Irish poet.
Name sounds familiar.
Playwright. Waiting for Godot is probably his best known play. The thing that was very interesting about most of his work was set-wise, it's very minimal typically. Like Waiting for Godot, you need a place for 2 men to sit down and a tree.
Okay.
That's all you need.
So very Our Town in the set dressing department.
Except not so much of it.
Yeah, like less than Our Town.
Yes. And there's even like one play, I don't remember the name of it, where it's like, I know at least parts of it, there are 3 people holding urns, and there's like a spotlight on all 3 of them, and whoever has the brightest spotlight is talking, and that is it.
Wow.
So very minimalist in the set department. But the idea is, on those kind of things, it's obviously very much about the people and the conversations. It's very, very intimate. Epic is more like Lord of the Rings or something where you have countries and it spans the world being almost destroyed. Yay! I like epic, and I like
we like world destroying. So
Yes.
that lends itself to this show as well.
Yes, we love destruction
Big
on
fans.
big or small scales. Okay, okay, and then an idea of the setting. You kind of need to know the setting that you want it to take place in. And it might be a generalized setting, like in this small town, or from this small town to the big city would be a classic sort of movement for a story to progress. But not necessarily every set that, the characters will go through, but what are the basic setting of the world? Medieval fantasy would be like kind of the setting for like my books. Okay. I prefer to say Iron Age, because it's really kind of pre-medieval, but whatever. Most people don't care.
Most people don't care.
An idea for the conflict. For a story, there must be some kind of conflict, whether it's an internal struggle with someone, or it's conflict that's major to the area, or whatever. There's a conflict, and that's kind of what allows you to create your plot, your sort of story arc. The idea of how you get from the beginning of your story to the climax, which is dealing with the conflict, and then the resolution, sort of the aftermath of the climax happening, which is, I usually get really relaxed. And then ideas about the resolution. What do you want it to look like in the resolution? This, I don't know if it's necessarily essential, but I kind of like to know, what is the impact on the world going to be from the story I told, especially if it's epic. If it's epic battle between 2 nations, there could be consequences, especially in a framework world, for that event going on.
It's actually a really good point. Like knowing how the world is going to change and what impact.
Because that really aids you in the story-driven part of framework world building is, you have this great clash between powerful civilizations, and then shockingly, 100 years later, they're both displaced by this third power that kind of took advantage of the moment and ate them both up. And then the other thing I like to know too is I wanted to determine if the plot will be driven by characters. If the story will be determined by characters or plot. Essentially, is it something event driven? This happens, then this happens, and this happens, and the characters are kind of moving through the events? Or is it character driven where, you're dealing with the consequences of possibly events that happen, but through the eyes of the characters, it's about the characters and their struggle within it. So is it a character driven story or a plot driven story? And kind of, if you have at least an idea of these things, you can start outlining. Now, what do we need in Jeffrey's story outline? Dun, dun, dun.
Do tell.
First thing, you need a mission statement.
Mission statement.
You need the idea of kind of centrally what you want to get across in your story.
Do you have an example of a mission statement? Like, do you have anything that you could share? It's a yes or no question. You're just staring at me with murder in your eyes.
Yes, I do have examples.
Okay, cool.
Now,
well, you didn't share your notes with me, okay? So it was an appropriate question. Don't give me that look. And I love when Jeff does this because, we'll be talking and I will just ask a question because I'm inquisitive and I have,
which is one of the reasons why
now that you mention this, how about this thing? And Jeff looks at me like, hey, stupid, I already thought of that. I have it written down right here, because he doesn't show me what he has written down. I think you purposefully do that just so you can give me those death looks when that comes up. You just have an excuse to be like, you suck. I know what's coming.
The story is outlined right in front of you. It's just on the other side of the monitor.
Right. It's over there where I can't see it. Thanks.
Yeah. But I do have an example of that, but I'm not going to share it now.
Okay. Would you like me to leave the room and just share it with the audience? Yes, please leave.
Since you don't ever listen to the show.
You don't listen to the I listen to the show.
I listen to the show every week.
Are you talking about when you edit it?
Yes.
Oh, come on. That's not fair. I do listen to the show.
Because you do the work of editing. You're going to take credit for that, too.
Do you subscribe to the show? Because you should subscribe to the show.
No, I do. You'll learn how bad you suck if you So the idea of a mission statement. So for the Stuart Son series, it's the idea is I want to tell a story of a young man who becomes an epic hero. And along the way, I want to discuss essentially what happens in a society that is driven by blood over being competent. So in early societies on Earth, blood is more important than competence. You become a noble of a land because your father was. You inherit the land from your father. You are the duke or the baron or the king because your father was. In a society where competence is rewarded, people get positioned because of quality. Billy's a peasant. He becomes a knight. He shouldn't be able to do that because he does not have the blood. However, because he's sort of breaking through that role because of his ability to become this epic hero, which was noted by the person who gave him the chance, it's sort of an exploration of that story and sort of societal struggles on both ends. And this guy trapped in the middle where, and people can feel like this all the time, where I don't really belong with the peasants anymore and I don't really belong with the nobles anymore because, to the peasants, I'm now a noble and I'm no longer one of them. And to the nobles, well, you still don't have the blood. You'll never be one of us. So that's sort of the mission statement for my overall story. Now, creating a story outline specifically, what I like to do is I like to flesh out the story into chapters. So I don't number the chapters at this point because I'm only guessing at the number of chapters. And typically when I go through the first time, what I'll do is I will sort of define chapters by kind of minor events that happen within the book. So I will go through, and the first wave will typically only be my plot. These are my plot chapters. There are some other chapters that are more about exploring characters. There's some other chapters with subplots. If they're major enough, they'll get worked in the first time. But usually it's not all going to be there for me the first time. I usually have an idea of the story arc in my head, but I don't necessarily know if it's all going to be there or not. So I go in and I'll write a sort of working chapter title name for each chapter. And once I have that, I'll kind of go through and I'll put a small description for each of them to sort of say what I want to cover in the chapter. For example, in the first book, The Stuart Son, the first chapter is to sort of express that these are kids, even in strange times. But they're in the middle of a playing session, which is uncommon actually in the time period. Usually much more focused on struggle, but it's two kids on the beach playing essentially knights and castles. And so it starts off, and it would actually maybe start off seeming like a very cheesy RPG style story where it's like, I'm the great knight and I've come to save the world. And then you come to realize that it's just this kid's imagination and they're on this beach, and then story starts to happen from there. But so that's sort of my first chapter. So when I sketched that one out, it was sort of, the name of what I thought the chapter was going to be called. And then, Billy and Maja playing on the beach. And that was enough for me to remember. You need enough here to remember. You usually want to have 3 things to describe the scene at least, or any of the set pieces. So once I have that done, that's sort of where I'm defining the acts inside of it. She's caught a furry animal. It's not a real animal. It's a stuffed animal toy, but she thinks she's hunted and caught something.
So just for the listener, because you probably can't hear the cat hollering in the background, but you just went seamlessly in from talking awesome? Right into talking about the cat. They might be able to hear that now. She's getting progressively louder.
Let's see what toy she has. I think it's thing 1 or 2.
You weren't kidding. She really does have a little toy in her mouth she's walking around with.
It's like if you have a cat and they've ever caught a rodent, they'll make that sound as they bring it up to announce themselves.
Aha.
She does that with kitty toys.
Gotcha. I have killed this kitty toy. And I announced it to you.
Good rock hitting. Come here, Rock.
Has she presented it in your bedroom? Is that her move?
I think we're supposed to follow her in there to see it because she's too lazy to come into here and she wants to go back to bed.
Why don't you go in there just so she'll be quiet?
She won't be.
She won't be?
No. She'll be fine. No one can hear but us.
Okay. She's quite loud.
Until I edit it later, I'm like, oh my God.
Gosh, we can hear her
it's
meowing
like
the whole time.
Crinkling food bags.
Oh, look. Continue. Continue, Jeff. No, what were you saying?
You son of a... I will...
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. Just a moment.
What? Why don't we start over? The story of the show creation here, folks. Okay. So we've kind of gone through, we've created at least a working name for a chapter. We've sort of defined the acts that we need to take place there, or we want to take place there. They're not always needed. And then essentially once I do that, if I know there's a character in there, I'll list them down. If I know there's an important prop or a specific location, like the chapter I was talking about, I needed a beach setting. I needed some driftwood toys for the kids to have, for them to be acting out their games. And I think there's a fake sword, but not a fake shield, but they're both important in the scene. And
the sword and shield are?
The sword and shield are, but the sword, there's a toy version of. The shield is just completely make-believe. But the idea is I kind of go through, and story-wise, I place it all out from where I want it to start, which is that scene, and to the end, which I'm not going to describe that or anything in the middle. But the idea is once I go through it and I think I have my plot down, I kind of look through and I see, do I see the whole story here? Is there something else? And at that point, I might add in more chapters because it's like, wait, I haven't really figured out a way to get this character I thought of in chapter 17 in there. So I'm going to add a chapter for that. Once I go through my second time and I've added these things to flesh out the plot, I'm then going to sit there and try and identify where's my first act, where's my second act, where's my third act. And once I have all of those 3 things identified, I like balanced books for acts. I don't like one act to dominate over the others. And there's story reasons you might want to have that happen sometimes. But for the books I've been working on, I typically prefer balanced. So sit there and go, well, there's 4 chapters for the beginning. There are 6 chapters in the middle and 3 chapters at the end. So then I'll look for additional content to insert into the other acts to balance out the book. And just to get there, and I have very specific rules for the way I write. Action chapters are very short. They're only about the action sequence happening. There might be small action sequences in other ones, but if it's about action, that's really all it's going to be. I know those are going to be short chapters.
So you wouldn't have a chapter with specific balance between, say, drama, action, and comedy. No. You would just have it be about the action.
Yeah. So it'd be a build up for the action in another chapter. That's just the way I like to do it. I don't necessarily believe in balancing that because for me, when I get caught up in an action scene, I don't want the action scene to be dragged out too long. For me, I don't like reading action scenes where he takes a sword swipe and then there's 50 pages of content in between of him thinking about his early childhood and how he got here. And that's the whole story was that one sword swipe. I probably wouldn't go that way. And then like the end of the book, it's like he gets to where he's at and the sword swings again and he kills the guy and the story's over. But I do
stories like that certainly have
existed. I like to balance it out in acts, not in chapters. Because in every chapter, I want some kind of, or every act, I want some kind of mini story arc of a certain kind of conflict that's going to happen within there that gets dealt with. Because I like to use that to help build towards the big climax that's coming. So for me, I really have a small 3-act in every act. So I have I have a 9-act story now, I guess.
9 acts.
3 times 3 is 18.
Well, I mean, if you want to get nitpicky, like there's the whole, each chapter, it doesn't necessarily have to be this way, but I've certainly read books where, I've read books where chapters ran right into each other. Like, although it's like, here's a chapter separation, it literally picks up off of the sentence of the prior chapter that ended. But there's also something to be said where your chapters are each individual little stories, and then there's that are related, and then there's other ones where they're not even related. Like if like World War Z is a great example. Is that every chapter in that book is complete? It's
self-contained. It's like a short story.
It's a self-contained vignette. Yeah, it's a short story. But I'm not specifically referring to that style, but in the style of the one in between there, where you are still telling a story that is all interconnected. It's just one long story, but your chapters have the 3-act structure built into them. So while the book has a 3-act structure, you additionally have that structure in every chapter.
Yeah. And you could definitely do it that way. That's one of the things where it's just going to come down to the style that you want to do. But be consistent. And when you break that rule, do it very intentionally. Because I do believe rules are meant to be broken because that actually will convey something to the reader that you're intentionally meaning it to convey when you do it. But so it'll usually take me 2 or 3 pass-throughs at least. And I'm pretty solid on the story in my brain. Usually if it takes me more than 3 go-arounds, it's because I'm thinking up side stories that I now want in there that I didn't originally think out of. Or different things to extend the story that came to me as I see it, because I typically kind of see the story in my head as I'm writing it, which makes it easier, I think. I don't know if that's strictly a me thing. I'm sure there are many people who do it that way. Other people I know are very intentional. They write scenes and then they put scenes together, and they're very good at doing that too. But part of that is knowing your style. Until you've written a book, don't expect to know your style. I'm very new at this. I'm still, my real style is really still developing. Now, the thing I like to do once I have all of the chapters and a little descriptor of what I want to have happen, I go back through and I start listing out the characters I need for those chapters if I don't already know that. Because that's a very important thing for world building. You need to know your characters. That's one of the key things. You need to know how important the characters are. You're not going to put the level of detail into developing Red Shirt Guard 1. Like I said, I'll have a couple things to describe him, 3 points, and I'll have a name for him because I hate calling him Red Guard 1, even though, well, his shirt is red.
And he is a guard.
He is a guard, so not looking good.
Red Shirt Guard's going to have a bad day.
We have 47. It's going to be a long
here to honor. What's his name again? Red Shirt Guard for real? Red Shirt Guard. He was a good guard.
He made the ship tick.
Is his wife present? Yes, blue bloused woman. Okay, come forward, please.
Blue House, nice bosomed woman.
Hey, you added that.
It's written for a movie.
Fair enough.
Okay. So I'll go through, I'll start adding in all the needed characters. A lot of times when I'm doing this, when I'm world building or I'm story writing, I see scenes in my head that play out. Sometimes they'll make it in, sometimes they'll get cut. The editor's a jerk at that point. But it's like I'll start inventing the characters along the way. So there are certain characters you're going to have in the book because you need them. They're part of the plot, part of the story. There are other characters you want to have in there to achieve certain effects in the story. And there are other people in there because it's a world. There are people. And where you can write a very successful story with just a few characters, it's probably going to have a very small scope of action. Like it's going to be in a house or it may be in a small village. But, when you get into an epic story where you're crossing countries and crossing worlds, you're going to cross several characters. And so you kind of need to know their importance to the story. In my case, I kind of need to know them for the whole trilogy because maybe they're not so important in this story, but they become more relevant in the second or third story. Maybe, they're just a friend here, but, they become the love interest in chapter 3.
I'm a big fan of stories that do that, where you have a character that's very ancillary in one tale and you don't think much of them, but then they become like your favorite character in the second book because they get a much bigger part.
Or it's like, I even have one character who's going to show up intermittently in all 3 books. He's not important for any of the books, but he's important for saying something about the society. And so he'll kind of get revisited along the way. And you wouldn't want to be this character because he has a really bad novel and series. Bad stuff keeps happening to this poor guy the entire way.
Okay, I was going to say.
But it's more like story relief. Once again, you start building up tension. You need things to sort of break the tension down a little bit so you can add more tension to the story. And I'm a big believer of that. And I like telling stories. So for me, I like to have these little threaded things throughout that really aren't necessarily even needed for the story. It's kind of important actually in book 1 because he's kind of a red herring. No, ignore that.
Well, you haven't said who he is yet, so don't worry about it.
So, but what happens is I follow him even past his date of expiration for the story.
In the first book? Or?
In the first book. He's only relevant in the first book, and it's minorly relevant at that point. And then no relevance for the rest of it except for I want to explore my culture in a way that's interesting, but I also use it to help break down the actual story tension to give you a break from the action of the story. And so once I go through there and I add in a layer of characters, I might have to add more characters at some point because you're going to come up with them as you're writing as well. I like to store the outline in a place I can get to quickly. But the other 2 things you need are locations needed. So in this chapter, are they in one area? Are they in 5 areas? You need to know those areas. You need at least 3 words to describe those areas. So you have a basic idea of what you're talking about and you can be consistent going forward. Or maybe they're going from area A to area B. So you kind of need to know area A, area B. And if you spend time talking about the movement, you have to know that as a set piece as well, you might call it. So you need your locations. And then you need to know important props. So they find the Ring of Power in chapter 1. Bilbo's had it for a long time and just forgot to mention it to Gandalf. And Gandalf slaps him in the head. And, a whole trilogy starts off with the Ring of Power.
Oh, yeah. I've had this for ages.
But, if you have these important props, whether or not they have magical abilities, you need to know something about them. So when you refer back to them at a later date, you have those 3 descriptors. If you build onto it and you add a new descriptor later on, add it here. It's a good way to containerize all of the lexicon for the book and to be able to keep consistency in the story, balance the story you want to. So maybe you want a very long act 1, a very short act 2, and a little bit longer act 3. However you want to balance it out, this is your point to do it. But the point is when you're done, you will have chapter 1 through chapter X, which we will call 42 because it's a really long novel. And you'll know essentially all of the different locations. So if you don't have them built, you have still some time to throw together new locations. If you have new characters you need to build, you have time to build up characters. And if they're important characters that you haven't used before, you have some real time to flesh them out before you start writing with them. So the idea is when you get going, You sit there, you grab chapter 1, you spend 5 minutes going over what you have written down for it. And, you kind of quickly review what your mission statement is, and you start freaking writing. You know the characters. If you add anyone else in, just add them to your add them to your outline as you're going, because you might end up reusing them at some other point in your story. So for me, it's a back and forth. Whenever I start a new chapter, I like to go through, I like to look at where I'm going. I'll take a few minutes to plan out what I want to do in the chapter, and then I'll write it. And I will actually take the time to think about what I'm doing in the chapter before I write it. Once I start writing, I just like to write, especially for NaNoWriMo. My first draft, the whole point is, as I love to say, puking out the story. You're just going to puke it on out there. And the thing is, the better your outline is, the less you have to add on later on. Obviously, no matter how good you are, when you have an editor read it, when you have beta writers read it, if you're trying to move it to publication, or if you're trying to convert it over to a different medium. So like, I'm going to take this and turn it into a script for a video game, or a script for a short video I'm going to make for YouTube, or whatever you're planning to do with it. Other people are going to start interacting with it, and you're going to realize that it's not necessarily always so clear to them, and you're going to need some more here, some more there. That will always happen. But you'll have a pretty good first draft for story purposes if you get this kind of outline going. And you have one place you have to look at to keep track of your characters, to keep track of your locations, and the important props to the story. So that's what I like to do for chapter outlines.
I really don't. I'm sorry. I don't have much to add to it.
He doesn't have much to add because the new Destiny DLC dropped. He's actually playing it right now.
I'm not playing it right now. I am doing some organizing.
Yeah, if you saw his laptop, you wouldn't believe me. Actually, is
I actually do have a.
It must be on PC.
I do actually. I was going through some old computer stuff the other day, and I found my chapter outline for my prior book.
Oh, the one we talked about before?
The one that I did not write.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The one that I had intended to write for NaNoWriMo a couple of years ago and didn't complete.
Mm. So. Yeah, because I think we've talked briefly about that story before.
And I think the basic, just like one of the big reasons that Jeff and I are, Jeff is just a big proponent of helping and wants other people to succeed and wants to share his experience with NaNoWriMo. I am a big proponent of using episodes like this to help prepare you, because I didn't properly prepare and subsequently didn't complete the task. And
I'm sorry, as we had a blast in episode 140, but it really was proof of why you should prepare.
Yep, absolutely.
Until you can see that story moving through your head on its own, you need to prepare. And the good thing is later on, you can reutilize some of this stuff. Like one of the things that I'm going to do for book 1 is I'm going to come out with a lexicon, a codex for the book in audio form, and I'm going to release it, as the book comes out. So for like 8 or 12 weeks after the book comes out, just talking about the world, talking about backstory stuff, more specific stuff related to the book. But I can do that more easily if I track the stuff I'm doing as I'm going around. I know what I need to talk about. So that's really all there is. Outlining should not be that hard. Some people do a lot more prep work than this. Some people will put giant things on their walls with Post-it notes and yarn. And if you need to do that, that's up to you. But for me, what really works the most is having one place where I can get to all of the important, pertinent facts that I need to right away. And that is it for this episode.
What's it? Shorty but a goodie. Got a, real world or...
Oh, crap. Yeah, that stuff. Yeah. Actually, I do.
Your language has been terrible this episode. You're gonna explicit. You've explicited us already.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you have. You swore.
I was in soldier mode and I didn't even recognize it.
You did.
I'm glad you said that because I didn't even.
I believe you said the S poopy word. I think. It's pretty sure.
Okay.
Shit, Jeff. You said shit.
Oh, Michael just made this thing explicit.
You can just edit that, though. I was saying that as a reminder, so you can just cut that out. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you can cut it. Do you want to just add beeps? We can add beeps and just edit ourselves out. You should record yourself saying anvil, and then whenever one of us swears, what the anvil are you looking for? You can put that right over us.
I do have a sound because initially I was going to have a more polished show, and I had sounds of anvils, so I could just have an anvil sound that goes over.
Oh, I like that even better.
But yeah, no, I do the editing, so no. Okay.
No, but that's a great idea. Just, like a...
Yeah, and putting it in there every time you need it. Yeah.
How often do we need it? We don't swear very often. And then every once in a while, we accidentally fall into explicit like this one.
Yeah. But see, my thing is, it's like, even when we're explicit, it's barely. And but the thing is, several of our episodes are explicit.
Yeah,
and a lot of times it's even questionable whether it should be or not.
Yeah, usually when we put explicit, it's for there are times when it's for words.
I always err on the side of explicit.
Definitely.
Okay. So now for the world building task, this thing that Michael almost forgot about is to create and brainstorm if you need to, but create an outline that you're going to use for NaNoWriMo to tell a story. And this is a story outline.
I'm also going to say, why don't you sit down and write down what outlines you need? Like, for instance, I still need a story outline, I need a character outline, and I need a chapter outline.
So I don't have all those things. I will have files where I'll take all my characters in a list and I'll put stuff about them. I don't really call it an outline, but I have a character list, a location list, and stuff like that. But for me, the only true outline I use is the story outline. But, for those other things, it's how do you brainstorm it? How does it work for you? I use Post-it notes for almost all brainstorming.
How about a real world task?
Yes. I'm going to link a YouTube playlist in here from this person, Liana Kerzner. And she did one on feminism and gaming. And if people haven't noticed, and it's kind of quieted down some, there was this big stir up with Gamergate. And if you're a gamer like I am, like Mike is,
and Michael too,
you've probably heard of this. And if you have not, don't worry so much about it. But the thing I liked was since this happened, I don't know, like a year and a half or 2 years ago when it started, this was the first thing that was really intellectual at a level where I learned a lot of stuff. And it came away where I learned a lot about feminism, and it gave me things to think about. And I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but it was very intellectually done. It's from the side of a person who appears to be a gamer and a feminist, and it was sort of a different type of feminism than what you've heard of if you've been following the Gamergate stuff. So I think it's worth checking out if you like to educate, you like to give yourself ideas of things to think about. Check out this series, The History of Feminism, I believe it's called, from Liana K. It'll be in the show notes under the real world task.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.